Hi, everybody. It's Daniel here. You won't hear any references in this episode to the Russian invasion of Ukraine because we recorded it before all of that happened. It's taken us a while to get this episode out because it's all been a bit much, and one does what one can. But we hope that you enjoy this episode, a nostalgic reminder of a bygone time last week. Our thoughts are with the Ukrainian people. Thanks for listening. Peace. Hello and welcome to Because Language, a show about linguistics, science of language. My name is Daniel Midgley. Let's meet the team. If you anagram the letters of his name, you get lie in beans. You know what? No, I'm not going to do it that way. You know what? Ever since Ben and I have been doing the show, I've always been impressed by his ability to rock up and ask the good questions and know what's going on. He's just been...
worst.
He's my rock.
Yes.
I'm so full of admiration for him. So that's great. It's Ben Ainsley. It's Ben Ainsley.
Cool. That was cool. I really enjoy people saying nice things about me.
Yeah. You can see it in his face.
And the same is true for Hedwig. You know, she showed up in our lives mostly by chance, and she's just come to be such an integral part of the team. I get along with Hedwig because she's full of linguistic knowledge. Ben gets along with Hedwig because they both share an affinity for pop culture. I mean, everybody identifies with Hedwig. Everybody digs Hedwig because she's just so relatable. So
That's
it's
weird.
great to have her on the show.
Relatable?
The two of you. Yeah, I think everybody just digs you for some reason or other. So, and also if we anagram the letters of your name, you get avid shark digger, like it's somebody who digs sharks.
That's awesome.
What did you do with the oar?
I had to change the oa into two A's, but it worked.
Aha, you got double letters then. You can spread them around.
I had to do something, right?
What about me? What did I get?
Oh, you got lie in beans. Have you ever lied in beans, Ben?
Yes.
Lying around the house?
Yeah.
Sitting there?
I have no follow-up information, but yes, I have.
Okay.
I watched a Try Guys video where they filled a pool with spaghetti and got into that.
I keep thinking of that Who cover. The cover of the Who album with Pete Townshend in a tub full of beans. Gross.
Oh, nice.
That is gross. I mean, mostly because Pete Townsend.
That was the worst part.
Yeah, that's the gross part of that image, obviously.
Anyway, fun times. We're having a show. We're all here. We're all excited. And we're going to hear the news. Or Daniel's going to say something else before. What are you going to say?
What a great segue.
I know.
I had a great conversation with Dr. Jessi Grieser, a sociolinguist at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. She's the author of The Black Side of the River, and we're going to be hearing from her pretty soon about the book, so that's going to be really cool. Folks, if you want to hear better intros, you have to write them.
Daniel's had a bit of a day today, folks. That's the impression I'm getting.
Could you just make something fun? Last time was great. And you can do that by hitting us up with an email, hello@becauselanguage.com. You can also send something by SpeakPipe. It's on our blog, becauselanguage.com.
Hooray!
And if you want to hang out with all the peeps, we're hanging out on Discord these days. So come and join us there.
It's pretty fun.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I should not post gross medical videos to our Discord. That might... Well, I'm not sure I want to be relatable. So if I post gross skin stuff, maybe I'll become unrelatable.
What are you? Bob Dylan's third album? You're like sick of being popular, so now you want to like turn the fans away or something? Jesus.
Yeah. Gotta be indie. Gotta be... whatever. I don't know.
By the way, our last episode was a bonus patron edition where we talked about the recent flare-up of conflict in the world of pragmatics, people reassessing
Grice.
Herbert Paul Grice. And that was with Rickard Ockham, the Thai phonologist. So there's some really fascinating stuff there. I really enjoyed that episode.
He was great fun. I really enjoyed our time with Rickard.
And I think we ended up with some valuable advice for people who are teaching pragmatics. Like, you can still teach Grice, but you can put it in a context and stuff. And it was a good conversation.
So if you want to hear that, why don't you join our Patreon? We're Because Lang Pod.
Righto. Enough shilling, you stumpies. Let's get to the news.
It's nice to hear that you're not in the pocket of big language.
Big language.
This one was suggested by Aristemo, and it's about a priest who committed an infelicitous speech act for decades.
Even I heard about this.
Okay,
this
right?
This is how far it penetrated into so many different realms. This was, God, the virality on this story.
I just haven't stopped thinking about it.
Hot.
It is amazing. Words can be magic.
Can I do the thing? Can
Would
I
you please?
share what I understand from this story? Right. So there was a priest from the Catholic Church who, for years, was baptizing people wrong. Now, as a non-faith person my entire life, I didn't believe that there was a way you could baptize people wrong because, as a heathen, it all seems like, it's all, to my point of view, it's all made up nonsense, magical woo-woo mysticism anyway. So
if you do it the wrong way, it does nothing. And if you do it the right way, it does nothing.
This priest has been doing it the wrong way for decades.
Yes, Hedvig.
I may be an atheist, but I have a great deal of respect for religious people. And I think that the way they choose to do important rituals in life are important. And to them, so specifically to the Catholic Church, apparently the specific phrase you say when you baptize someone matters. So I heard some various Protestant priests being interviewed in other places where they were like, oh, different Protestant churches do it differently, or as long as you say something along these lines and put some water on their head, you're good. You can't have...
That's dirty Protestantism where anything goes.
But
That's
they did say
wild west of Christianity.
You have to do the water, though. And they said, torudup, dry baptism is not baptism. So there was some sort of line. But apparently,
there are churches where dry baptism, where a verbal baptism is doable. So it does exist. And like you say, Hedvig, we respect people. We don't necessarily respect bad ideas.
This is why she's so relatable. Look at her relating to other kinds of people, honestly.
I mean, I do have fun bashing away at religion, but that's not what I want to do with this one. I'm just so fascinated because what happened next was they discovered that this priest was saying, instead of, I baptize you in the name of the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, which you're supposed to do. He was saying, for decades, we baptize you, which makes it sound like it's us here in the congregation. But of course, according to officials who picked up the error, it's not us that baptizes you, it's Jesus.
And therefore, it has to be an anointed representative of Jesus who gets to do that.
The vicar. It's done vicariously, right? Which is where the word vicarious comes from. Because you're a vicar.
The priest can still say I, but referring to, in that moment, that person being Jesus, essentially.
That's right. It's not the community that does it. It's the priest that does it, and by proxy, it's Jesus doing it. Now, as many people know, I used to be a Mormon, and there is something like this in my background, and that is that young boys, age 16 or so, they read the sacramental prayer over the bread and the water, and this one needs to be word for word perfect. Otherwise, the young man has to start over, and everybody understands that there was a slip-up, start over. And in fact, they will actually, after the prayer, they will glance over to the local leader, the bishop, it's called a bishop, to make sure that they got it right.
Yeah.
But I'll just read this from the article. According to the Catholic Diocese of Phoenix, Reverend Arango was reciting the words used for baptisms incorrectly. The church has declared all baptisms he conducted up until that date invalid.
So this is actually kind of a big deal, though, right?
It is.
Yeah.
So from my understanding of the story, this means certain things like weddings and marriages
Communion.
And deaths and other stuff is also not valid because you need to be baptized into the church before any of that stuff can happen. But I want to make the distinction. That doesn't mean that all civil versions of those things are null and void, right? Obviously, if people get married under the law of Arizona,
I guess so.
They're still married.
The
Arizona state legislator is you're a married people. It's not that they're going, whoa, sorry, Catholic Church says no tax breaks for you.
For example, those children probably have a name.
Yeah, but what happens if some of them died in the interim? I mean, I'm no Catholic theologian.
No, that's true. The problem here becomes maybe, I don't know, we're not Catholic theologians, so maybe we shouldn't speculate too much, but I'm suspecting that it's about intention of the person. So if the parents and the child all intended to go through with the baptism and thought that they had, there might be there might be some wiggle room for them, right?
Well, apparently not according to this diocese, and that's what's fascinating about this. So let's bring in the linguistics. John Austin, language philosopher, in his Harvard lecture series way back when, a book came out about how to do things with words. He describes different kinds of acts that are going on when we say things. So there's the locutionary force. That's the thing that you say, the actual words, and that's what the priest got wrong. Then there's the illocutionary intent, which is the intentions that you had when you said the thing. And then he also describes perlocutionary effect, the effect that happens by saying something. But what happens in this case is that the locution, what you actually say, is the thing that matters, and doing that wrong actually invalidates the intention that you had.
So my understanding of Catholic dogma would be that if someone who had been baptized this way and it is now invalid, or it was never valid in the first place in the eyes of the Catholic Church, if any of those individuals have died, they're going to purgatory. Like no,
limbo's no longer a thing for babies.
Like
but
no heaven for them.
That's pretty serious consequences if that's what you believe.
But they're going to purgatory and then potentially heaven, right? In other words, you should be going to hell, right? Purgatory is for when you burn off your sins and then you go to heaven. Like
any consequence in this case.
I thought, though, that if you're not baptized, you cannot go to heaven. Like, full stop.
I don't know.
Reading through the article, this is the view expressed by the article writer's understanding of Catholic doctrine.
Right.
The weird thing, it's just so strange because this is supposed to be a God that knows the thoughts and intent of your heart. But this is a case where people can have the right intentions, but because the wording is wrong, the speech act becomes infelicitous. So,
look, this isn't unique to the Catholic Church by any means, right? Like, we've done stories about how the Oxford comma cost a company, like literally millions of dollars, right? So in any kind of contractual format, the language matters very, 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 very much. And I guess at the end of the day, this is all this really is a contract with God.
Yeah, and the intention can't really matter because you'd like to say, well, God will give them a mulligan because it was intended that they be baptized. But if God can give mulligans, well, then he can give mulligans on lots of things, including like salvation, like maybe baptism isn't necessary at all. And I don't think that's a road that the church folks want to go down.
That sounds like a little bit of a slippery slope problem because we're talking about I versus we, and we includes I. So it's not like a dramatic difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
I could see how the Catholic Church, not necessarily renowned for being like progressive New Age thinkers, would say, this seems like an encroachment on our power and validity. I say, no, sir.
Yeah, I mean, is baptism necessary or is it not? If it's not necessary, fine. There's no need for a Catholic Church.
But they also believe in a forgiving God and that Christianity is being forgiving.
Have you met Catholics? They really don't. They don't. They really don't believe in a forgiving God.
Here's the other thing. They're treating this like a product recall. It is so interesting because they're saying, if you have been affected by this event, please come forward.
Come on down.
And we will...
Bring your faulty, unbaptized spawn and we will...
And maybe I am going to be bashing away at religion a little bit, but it seems to me like I remember what my mom and my sister went through when I left the Mormon faith, and just how confused and hurt they were and worried. They were really legitimately worried for me. Mm-hmm. And it just seemed to me like religion...
You left their world.
Yeah, I left their orbit. It seems to me like that religion was the cause of a lot of unnecessary suffering. And I just kind of want to say to all those Catholic people, I know that this isn't going to be very comforting, but my belief is that, it's okay. It's all okay, right? Nothing bad has happened here, but...
I'd say the from what I'm familiar with in terms of Catholic families and Catholic culture, having worked in a Catholic school for many years, the people who are going to be most distraught about this are the grandparent tier of Catholics that exist, who will be very, very concerned. I think the middle-aged tier and the kid tier are going to be like, oh, okay, well, like if Abuela is particularly upset about it, I'll go and get baptized by like the new priest. It's all good. Whereas I think it's only the older generation who are going to be like, oh, no.
Yeah, maybe that's true.
Again, it's the people who believe it most that are harmed the most.
But maybe we should also just type briefly back to linguistics because there's one word that we didn't use, which is performative speech acts.
Yes,
which
please.
is
Yes,
what,
please.
what this is about. So there are certain verbs that are special that when you say them, you are doing them. For example, I promise Daniel that I won't tap the table and disturb the audio recording this podcast session.
And when you did that, it changed the world because now a promise exists and it didn't before.
Yes.
Right?
So the thing that the verb promise describes is also the action that saying that word is. So you can also do this in sentences by saying like hereby. It's like I hereby pronounce you a husband and wife or whatever. And it is in that sentence. It's this weird thing that only happens with certain sentences where like you do them at the same time. Because otherwise when you say like I'm drinking water, saying that isn't drinking water.
Yeah.
Right.
But
Actually,
saying
by the
promise,
very nature, you can't be drinking water when you say drinking water.
Exactly. But even if like I'm farting and I am farting while I'm saying it, me saying I'm farting is not the farting.
Yep.
But saying I promise.
But if I say, I now pronounce you husband and wife in the right situation, then magically you've got two married people in front of you.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
It's magical.
And they're also tied into, if you like, you did Butler and stuff when they talk about like performing gender, that when you, it's all sort of linked and it's very interesting. So in this case, this sentence is performative according to the Catholic Church, but it is only performative if it is said exactly the way they have mandated.
Otherwise, it's infelicitous.
Otherwise it's not, you're just saying the words. You're not doing the action. So performative verbs are really cool. If you can think of any other common ones besides promise, I think swear, like I swear that I won't hurt you. Vow.
Can we think of anything that isn't just a synonym for promise?
Yeah, exactly. It's really hard, isn't it?
I can think of one. I use this example a lot in my classes. Arrest. If the right person says, I arrest you in the name of the law, and
that's
in the right
one.
situation,
I'm placing you under arrest. Yeah.
you've got an arrested person there. That's
or,
what you've got.
Is it like, I declare you innocent in the eyes of the court?
Yes.
Actually, Daniel, I might push back on that. I don't think that that's true.
Oh, really? Okay, you must know something about the situation that I don't.
No, not at all. Because, like, I'm just picturing a police officer yelling after me, running away into the distance. I'm placing you under arrest. It's actually the act of, like, sort of violating my autonomy to do things that I want to do that is the actual reality of being under arrest, right?
No, you can be placed under arrest by distance.
Really?
Can you?
Yeah. Or at least in Swedish.
Hedvig, I want to know this story. How you learned this one firsthand.
No, like someone says, like, you this person is arrested, and, you know, if you encounter them,
you have to put a warrant out for someone's arrest, I believe. Right? So if there's a warrant for someone's arrest, that means the arrest hasn't happened
by
yet.
Distance.
This doesn't necessarily invalidate my point, which was that if the right person says it in the right situation, then the arrest happens.
I guess so, but
we're just talking about what that situation
is. But then
is.
I'm thinking about Hedvig saying I'm farting and farting at the same time. It's the farting, right, that does it. I would be really interested to know. I would love to know the answer to this one.
It's just such an interesting area where you have magic words that can do magical things. It's the situation is rife for weird little eventualities, and this is certainly one that has, got a lot of people thinking.
I bet our Discord is going to have this answer in like a second after the show goes up. There's going to be a big long list of other ones like this.
Oh, by the way, it was Llewellyn Moss.
Llewellyn, who's that?
Llewellyn Moss, the character whose name we could not remember in our last episode from No Country for Old Men.
Of course it was. Good memory. Okay, we should do the next news story.
Let's go to the next news story. This one comes from Stephen Piantadosi and a team from MIT and the University of California at Berkeley, and it's about numbers and thinking. I've watched my little daughters acquire numbers like 1 and 2 and 3. They happened, pretty quickly. 4 came a bit later, but then there was just this explosion where they just, Dad, I want to count to 100. Okay, go. 1. And then I had to listen to children counting. And what would happen was they would get to 20. 20 was a big deal. Of course, they would skip like maybe 16 or 17.
What is with 16?
16!
My kid didn't count 16 for like a year and a half.
Why did they always skip 16? Anybody else? Is your child skipping 16?
I need to know this. I need to know if it's just an English thing, if it's just your and my kids are the same kind of dumb thing. I need to know.
I am really surprised to hear this. But then, they sit on 20 for a while, and then suddenly it just goes, 30, 40, 50. Once they get that, then it's off to the races.
Unless you're speaking Danish or French.
Oh, French. Don't.
Danish is worse.
No, that can't be possible. Surely not.
Danish is very strange.
Danish is worse. It is.
Maybe we'll get on to Danish.
We can talk about that at some point, but it is worse than French.
It's about the Tsimane people who live in the Bolivian rainforest. They have numbers up to 100. After that, they have to borrow from Spanish. But the people themselves, the experimental subjects that they used, could count from anywhere to, maybe 6, maybe 20, maybe 40. And so what they would do is a certain kind of counting task where they put a bunch of batteries or sticks or whatever in a horizontal line. And they say, all right, I want you to take some sticks and you give me the same number of sticks that I just gave you, except, don't put them horizontally, put them vertically so you can't just line them up one to one.
Right.
So it's a counting task. And what the team found was that people could do it, but they tended to get wrong answers at a certain point. And it was just below the level that they could count at. If they could count to 14, they started making mistakes about 12 or 13. If they could count up to 30, they would, make mistakes a few lower than that.
So what's going on there? Is it like we just put enough mental space aside for the numbers that we have, and when we're redlining an engine, we just kind of get a bit flugely when we get to the top?
But let's for a moment think about what it means to be a person who counts to 14 and not much further. Because it doesn't mean that you are less intelligent or stupid or that you can't do math or trade. Because you can actually do trade without numbers. You can, for example, tell if you have the same number of something without being able to count either. And you can also count different objects in different ways.
And people who don't have numbers are actually pretty good at estimating. Like if you have, how many would this pile plus this pile make? And they do just as well as we would.
Right. So what the task is sort of involves counting. So if you rarely count above 14, you might not encounter counting situations above 14 often in your life. And that's the reason why you don't have more words for it. So it might not be the lack of the words themselves. It might be the lack of encountering such situations.
Okay, I get you. You can count to 14, but the reality is, if there's almost like a probability distribution of all of the times you've had to count in your life, the 14, if the number is 14 that you get to, is probably one of the smaller probability bars in that graph, right? You've probably counted to 8 or 9 heaps of times, but you've probably only counted to 13 a smaller number of times.
Right, I can embed 6 levels of clauses into one sentence.
That's tough.
But I rarely do. And if I were to try it, I'd probably be not very good at it because I don't get much practice. But theoretically, if I had a pen and paper and some time, I could probably work it out.
Yep.
Theoretical depth, infinite, observed depth, 2.
Yeah.
Now, are we dancing around the idea that our language affects our cognition? Having words for numbers makes it easier to think in terms of numbers. Could this be a way in which Whorfians might actually be right?
I've got to say, I find Hedvig's explanation of probabilities of how often you've done a task to be a far more intuitive answer than the numbers you have guide how you think about the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I also think there's a bit of a chicken and an egg thing here as well, right? Yes, the probabilistic distribution of the things you've had to count in your life probably impacts how good you are at certain numbers. But at the same time, how good you are at certain numbers probably impacts the types of things you tend to see and interact with and the kind of counting tasks you gravitate towards and all that kind of stuff as well.
So in that case, it's not about not having the words for things or not using the words for things. It's just your experience in performing a certain kind of task.
I'm sorry for being the party pooper, but
No,
but
that's,
yeah, when
that's fine.
people say this language has more distinctions or more words here and there, it's they probably have that because their environment and their context is such that they encounter situations where they need more of those words. So we can't really tell if it's the fact that they have more words for it or the fact that they live in surroundings where they do that experience more often. And I don't know how to tell those apart.
The long-time listeners of this show will have heard this example so many times now, but it's one of my favorites and I love it. There's that terrible racist thing that like Eskimos, which is a terrible word, have like 30 words for white, right? Which is just not true.
For snow.
Well, no.
For white.
The misunderstood one is the thing that a lot of sort of like dumb white people will say is like, oh, yeah, they have like 30 words for white. The reality is the Sami people or any herding persons who live in the tundra will have dozens and dozens of different words for snow because there are dozens of different varieties of snow that might impact how their herds can access feed underneath the snow or access how they can travel across the snow or impact how they can access fish underneath frozen rivers and just all this kind of stuff, right? Like there's a crusty layer and then there's a thingy layer and there's another layer and another layer. So yeah, they do have all those words for snow because snow, when you look really closely, changes quite a lot.
Mixed up Inuit and Sami, but I think it still applies.
That's because my experience is with the Sami people who are herders, whereas a lot of the Inuit peoples aren't necessarily herders. They might just be pure sort of like fisher hunter-gatherers kind of thing.
I have a word for a snow thing that you don't.
Really?
We have a different word for the crust that is not the same as crust on bread or whatever.
Cool.
Skara. It's only that. And it like you say, Ben, like if you live in a place where it snows more, like I also have other words for like different kinds of mush snow and things. Snow mod is like a certain kind of mush snow because like you say, it matters.
It matters.
Yeah.
We've started off talking about Whorfianism, but I think that the example that you're giving is not really, it doesn't pertain because remember, there are three things: language, culture, environment, and thought. Right? Those three things. And the Whorfian idea is that language influences thought. Ben, the example you've given is culture influencing language, which is not under dispute and is separate from the Whorfian question.
It is.
I guess what I'm trying to say then is that I believe that this is a more ready explanation than the Whorfian explanation for the counting example that we're looking at.
Right. So Ben and I are saying that like the surroundings and the culture is influencing what they can do and the experiences. No, language or thought, like either, but it's like it's not like a full triangle because there's not necessarily, this example doesn't prove a link between language and thought, irrespective of the third one.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And it's really hard to think of examples that don't, like, in order to do that, we need, like, I think some of those things with like the Spanish and German gendered words and asking people to associate
like
adjectives.
Bridges and is like a bridge
Keys
powerful or beautiful and all that kind of stuff.
Those ones are better, I think.
I think so too.
They're more well controlled.
But I'm still really interested in this idea that numbers, make it easier for you to think in terms of numbers. Because there are other experiments, like, for example, Dutch kindergarten children, when you give them two numbers to add up, they perform worse than English-speaking children, and they think that might be because it's 420 instead of 24, and that might make it harder in some way. There's just a number of little experiments that have just been piling up, and I'd love to air them someday, but not today. But I think numbers are just this really interesting proving ground that a lot of people who do believe in Whorfianism are sort of coming to and expanding. So I don't know where that's going to end up. I don't know what I think about it. But I do like Hedvig's explanation. So what you're saying is this might not be a case of language influencing thought. This might be a case of the environment experiences influencing thought, which is totally fair. I don't have a problem with that. And we can't really tease apart whether it's language or whether it's experience.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I get that. Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that for me. Let's finish up with one from Hedvig, actually.
Yeah, no, so this was something, I don't know if anyone pointed this out in our Discord as well, but for those who are interested, so we're going to air this episode after, but we're recording it before, right? Because today that we're recording is going to tell us thing to our listeners. It's the 20th of February we're recording, and 20th of February, which is a Sunday, and tomorrow on the Monday, 21st of February, is the International Mother Language Day, and it is proclaimed by UNESCO, and it's been going on since 1999, and it's to promote the preservation and protection of all languages used by peoples of the world. It's still called Mother Language Day. If you want to call it your native language or first language or anything like that, I'm sure I'm sure you're still included. And yeah, it's a day people celebrate it all kinds of different ways. So the ELR, the Indigenous Languages Archive, are celebrating it with various events going on that you can check out. I think some of them are going to be recorded. You can look at them later. We'll put a link in our show notes. I like to celebrate it by just tweeting and using social media in Swedish instead of English for a while, which I do anyway. But it's just fun.
What would you recommend that an English speaker, like, I learned English as my first language. What can I do to celebrate International Mother Language Day? Speaking English doesn't seem like the thing. Well,
so you might just try and learn about linguistic diversity in the world, and I would suggest actually trying to learn about the first languages spoken by people in your community. So like in the town you live in, what kind of linguistic diversity is there? And is there anything you could learn from them, maybe? Learn some basic words in other languages. It is also, this year is also the UNESCO International Decade of Indigenous Languages. So that's going on from 2022, which is this year. Remember everyone, it's 2022.
Amazing.
As bonkers as that sounds. And it's going to go on for another decade, and there's going to be various events going on celebrating Indigenous languages.
We will have a link to a few of those things. Maybe even for Australians, I will include a link to the census website, which you can look up your suburb and see what are the most common languages other than English that are there. And
that's fun.
That might be a good little awareness builder for me personally. I think I know, but I'm not quite sure.
I've looked at the linguistic demographic breakdown of Perth before. It's not very surprising.
Okay.
So we've got
German, French.
I mean we do, but like not very high at all. So our big ones are Mandarin. We've got a lot of Italian,
Vietnamese,
a lot of Vietnamese, and then
there's a lot of Hindi speakers.
I was about to say probably a bit of Hindi, but I mean, Hindi is a bit tricky, obviously, because you don't know whether someone's probably coming from like an Urdu background or a Bengali background or something like that.
Yeah, that's right.
And then I'm trying to think. There's one big obvious one I'm forgetting, I reckon. Spanish is not huge.
Spanish is coming up, though.
Greek?
It's getting bigger.
Greek. There would probably be a fair bit of Greek as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, happy International Mother Language Day, everybody. And we want to hear what your ideas are for celebrating this day. I'm here with Dr. Jessi Grieser, a sociolinguist at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, and the author of The Black Side of the River. Thanks for having a chat with me today.
It's an absolute delight to be with you again, Daniel.
Yes, it seems like a world away from the last time we talked, wasn't it?
Right? There was an in-person moment, and like we could both be in the same place in
New York City. It was very nice.
Yeah.
But things have changed. That time we talked about Talking Place, Speaking Race. Did I get the name backwards?
Yes. No, I think that's right. It's Talking Place, Speaking Race, this is an outgrowth of that project. And so the big thing that has happened is just a real shift in the focus of that particular project to make it more accessible and more readable, which I really enjoy because as a sociolinguist, like one thing that is a major problem in sociolinguistics is we draw a lot from working class communities, from minoritized communities, these communities that have these particular ways of speaking, that have these really interesting linguistic features. And we go and we record them and we collect their data, and then we don't really do anything that is useful to those communities. And so what my publisher really pushed me toward was, let's write something that could actually be read by the people who this is about. And that's where The Black Side of the River came from, where I just said, look, what I need to do is not write an academic thing that's going to exist for only linguists and only linguists to be interested in. It's got to be something that's for the community, by the community, about the community, accessible by the community, purchasable by the community, all of those sorts of things.
So I want to start with a sentence from the book. When Black people cross rivers, it matters.
Yep.
What's behind that sentence?
So, I mean, when you really think about it, so it started with the sense of where this place is. So Southeast DC is a quadrant of DC. So DC crosses at the capital. So there is Capitol Street, which runs north and south. And then there's actually not a street that runs through the center of the Capitol in the center of town, but there is Constitution Avenue and Independence Avenue. So Constitution Avenue is what would be First Street in the north, and Independence Avenue is what would be First Street in the south. And so the rest of DC is all oriented around where you are in relation to the Capitol. If you're north and west of the Capitol, you're in northwest. If you're north and east, you're in northeast, and so on and so forth. And then there's this quadrant called Southeast. And there's part of the quadrant that is it's south of the Capitol, east of the Capitol. Yep. But it's also west of this particular river. And that river was originally called the Eastern Branch River. And then it became named after the Native American tribe that originally owned the land, that continues to own the land because it was seized from them illegally. The Nacotchtunk tribe. Which eventually became anglicized as the Anacostine. And that's where we get the name Anacostia. It is this whiteification of the Native American tribe that was there.
That's very fitting because the A means without, and the Anacostia means Anacostine.
Yep, I hadn't thought of it that way, but it is without the Nacotchtunk people anymore. And so we named the river and then the neighborhood on the other side of that river, Anacostia. And so the fascinating thing, and when I give public talks about this where I get to show slides and things, I actually show a couple of maps of DC where they just flat out leave this part off.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so very often when you look at maps of DC, especially ones that are made for public consumption or kind of artistic reasons, they'll just forget about this whole part of DC because it is technically part of the Southeast Quadrant, but there's also part of the Southeast Quadrant that's on the other side of the river, on the richer, whiter side of the river. And so people think of that as being part of DC. And then once you cross the river, they just sort of forget about it. Or they think of it as some of the things I talk about in the book is the Washington Post has called it the basement or the stepchild or all sorts of just terribly negative things that they use to describe it. And at the same time, as DC has changed throughout the rest of the city, it has been where Black people have settled. And so it is one of the blackest parts of DC. So it's this neighborhood that's incredibly rich with Black culture and history and conversations. A really recent thing that has happened in the past couple of months, and in fact, I didn't even know this. This gets to be a Because Language exclusive. The DC is divided up for governance reasons into 8 wards. Okay. And this neighborhood has been part of Ward 8. And so it's always been Ward 8, and people talk about it as being Ward 8, and it's Anacostia and several other neighborhoods that are part of Ward 8. Well, recently, Ward 8 has extended across the river and now includes this, bougie is the right word for it. This
Love that word.
Yeah, very gentrified. And I stayed there when I was giving a book talk a week ago and then learned that part of the city has now been annexed as Ward 8. And so that is what it means that when Black people cross rivers, it matters. The ways that this part of DC is becoming connected to other parts of DC and what that means for the history and the culture and the people that have always lived there, what that means for who chooses to live there in the future. One of the big things was, we don't have grocery stores. And, a big thing that several of my interviewees said was, we don't have a Whole Foods. We're going to know that we're in trouble once we get a Whole Foods. But now Ward 8 has a Whole Foods. It's just on the other side of the river.
Oh, okay, because they redrew the boundary.
Right.
Oh, okay. So I was going to say, you've made it when there's a Whole Foods, but they're not saying that. They're saying, we're in trouble when there's a Whole Foods. You've been gentrified, right? That some other culture is there when you have a Whole Foods. And so there's a real concern of what is takeover versus what is agency, and what is
What are the ways that people get to control this land for themselves? And I think that's a really important part of what this neighborhood is. And a really important part of what I'm trying to write about and what I'm trying to bring forth is a way for us to think about how do we allow a Black community to speak for itself, to make claims for itself, and what kinds of things do we need to be listening for where maybe the white developers might think, oh, this is people asking for XYZ kind of change. But what discourse analysis shows and what variationist sociolinguistics can show is, no, this is actually people saying, we're doing pretty good. And what we actually need you to do is to support the Black culture that's already here.
So being able to say, this is who we are, this is who our neighborhood is, that's being challenged.
Exactly. Yeah.
And in fact, it's always been challenged because media narratives about Black neighborhoods,
Yeah.
There's a lot of bad vibes.
Yeah. And there's this real narrative. So I talk about the big D discourses, and this comes from James G., who is both a linguist and a rhetorician. So he works really well for someone like me who's in a rhetoric division of an English department. I can assign him to my graduate students and know that they're getting what they need no matter what their direction is. But James G. has this idea of a big D discourse.
Okay.
And a big D discourse is the sort of overarching narrative that we have about a particular phenomenon. And the big D discourse about urban change, gentrification specifically, if we want to use that word, is often that it's about flows of money. And it's about helping people or about helping neighborhoods. It's about blight and fixing blight or things like that. And what that ignores is the ways in which people might not consider it to be blight or might not consider it to be a problem. It ignores the ways that people have always found community in the place that they live. And it especially, and I would argue deliberately, ignores the racial aspects of it. And so, you kind of come into a neighborhood and say, well, like this neighborhood has deteriorated, and so we're going to fix it up. And like, won't this be great? We're going to have this wonderful fixing up of this neighborhood. And when you really listen to the voices of the people who've lived there all along and the people who are invested in the community, what they say is, no, like that's not what this is. The city has allowed this neighborhood to deteriorate. They've not put money in, and they've let it get to a point where then they can come in and say, oh, well, the neighborhood is in shambles, so now we're going to offer you help and we're going to fix it. But that fixing is going to draw other people in. And so the really interesting thing that I discovered in my work was that there's really a way to listen to the people who are already in the neighborhood in a way that amplifies the things that Black people need and the ways in which this can actually contribute and continue the Black community that's already there.
Okay. So let's dig into how this plays out in language. I think if our listeners have listened to our Talk the Talk episode with you back in the Talk the Talk days, we found that there were Black residents. They'd been there the whole time. They were using language, especially African American English, as a way of establishing their presence in the neighborhood in the face of, I guess, what I want to say is encroachment, but maybe that's not the right way to think about it, by, I guess, white people who are speaking white American English, I guess what's considered standard U.S. English.
Mm-hmm.
But now the picture that I'm getting is also that they're promoting the idea that we've been here all along and we've been fine all along. What does that kind of talk sound like?
Right. So at a micro level, which is what I talked about the last time you had me around. So at a micro level, that looks like using African American English in certain kinds of topics. And so that's things like, okay, if I'm going to talk about the neighborhood, I'm going to use a greater percentage of my talk using features of African American English. So things like stress bin, we've been here all the time. or multiple negation, negative concord, right? So we're going to use these features of African American English more often when we're talking about things that are about the neighborhood, when we're talking about things that are about Southeast more generally or DC more generally. And it's a way of instantiating, okay, this is Black space. And when I talk about this Black space, I'm going to sound a little Blacker when I talk about it. And actually, I was just rereading, because I assigned it today, a piece by Kara Becker from 2009, and she was studying the Lower East Side of New York City, which is where Lebov did his famous work that basically founded the field of sociolinguistics in the 1960s. And she found really similar things, where she's found that, okay, when people talk about the Lower East Side, they use this New York feature of lack of R more often.
Even today?
Even today. So yeah, or at least 10 years ago. But so like there's this feature that isn't registered as New York. And if you're trying to say, oh, I'm a New Yorker, as you talk about being from New York, you're going to use that feature. And I found the exact same thing in DC. Like if you're going to try to sound more DC, well, DC isn't registered as Black space. It is called the Chocolate City. You even see white people wearing shirts that say DC Chocolate City on it. And so it's registered as Black space. And so people are more likely to use Black English when talking about it.
I remember the bit about Gus, who says they ain't make improvements for us.
Exactly.
That's on the micro level. Okay, cool. I got that far.
Yeah, so that's the micro level. So at a micro level, you see these minute changes in the actual, like, morphological and syntactic structures that people choose to use. But on the macro level, you also see things like anticipating the criticisms of the neighborhood. So, for example, this neighborhood, as I mentioned, the Washington Post has called it the basement. They've called it the stepchild. There's a joke map of DC that makes fun of different neighborhoods. And for instance, Georgetown, which is a very gentrified, bougie, upper class neighborhood, on the map, it calls it the Metroless Popped Collar Land.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Like describing the people who are there. Or another part of the city where the National Zoo is, it says single ladies and pandas. Is the joke about what's there. I'm like, yep, nope, that's legit. That's where I lived as a single lady and visited the pandas.
Fair. What are they saying about Anacostia?
And in Anacostia, it is the zone of perceived danger.
Okay, that hurts.
Yeah. So you have these ways of talking about the neighborhood. It's dangerous. It is unsafe. It's unclean. It's full of poor people. And those are the things that are just out in circulation. And of course, being a good interviewer, being a good academic, you're not going to bring that to the table and go, how do you feel about these sorts of things?
Yeah. You wait for them to bring it up if they want to. Right,
you wait for them to bring it up. And the answer is they don't bring it up, but they automatically counter it.
Oh.
And so instead of, when nobody volunteers, nobody talks about, oh, people think this neighborhood is unclean. But instead, they volunteer, let me talk to you about the ways that this neighborhood is beautiful.
That's nice.
Let me talk to you about the ways that it was rural when I was growing up. Oh, people had chickens in their yard. People had gardens in their yard. When you go up on this hill, you have the most beautiful vista of the entirety of DC, which is true, by the way. And so people volunteer this as a way of just preempting those other sorts of conversations and saying, no. This is a place where I felt wonderfully secure as a child. This is a place where I felt welcome. This is a place where I feel safe. This is a beautiful place. And so all of these ways of just cutting the conversation off at the pass, essentially, and instead just getting out there. No, this is a place you want to be. It's not just about, let me tell you how beautiful my neighborhood is. It is, let me tell you how beautiful my neighborhood is because you think it's ugly and you think it's in need of fixing.
There's also middle-class Black residents who are kind of newcomers.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, they're trying to distinguish themselves from the white gentrifiers. Have you noticed a difference in the way that those two groups of Black residents use language?
Absolutely. And so so this was one of the things that I fully confess I've underplayed a little bit in the manuscript that ended up being the book, because I wanted to emphasize some of the more broader similarities. And some of these are a little bit more highly technical, and so to talk about them involves more statistics and things like that. And so I didn't want to throw all of that into the book because, again, I wanted to write a book that was like, okay, like if you're interested in this neighborhood, you can read this book.
Ooh, but we get it here on the show. Yay!
We get it, right?
Okay.
And so you see these really subtle differences. So, for example, I went in to this study as a doe-eyed graduate student 10 years ago, going, I'm going to find all sorts of interesting things to talk about class differences in African-American English. And that was why I wanted to study this neighborhood where middle-class Black people were moving into the neighborhood from other parts in DC. But what I found was that the same sorts of patterns were happening, even at a lesser extent, because what happens is that becomes the way that middle-class Black residents can criticize what's happening. Because otherwise, if you're, say, a lawyer who's educated at Howard, which is the historically Black college and university in DC. It's a very famous HBCU, and sort of one of the roots of the history of Black wealth and Black success in DC is that lots of Howard-educated Black people. Yep. So say you've graduated from Howard and you're a doctor or a dentist or a lawyer, but you've been vaguely priced out of the rest of DC, or at least maybe you see more opportunity in this spot of DC where white people are still hesitant to move into, but you feel comfortable moving because you're a Black person and there's other Black people there.
Yeah, but then you're also kind of part of the problem as well. So
you're part of the problem. And if you criticize the problem, you're criticizing yourself.
That's exactly right. Oh, right. It's a dance. Okay, cool.
It's a very careful dance. And so that's part of the reason why we see the patterns in morphosyntax that we do. So I was going, oh, okay, I'm going to find these wonderful, wonderful patterns in like the actual language structure. And what I found instead was that no matter what social class people were from, the kinds of things they talked about led to an increase in use of these morphological or syntactical features, because it's a way for everybody to go, this is a problem. And I'm laying claim on this neighborhood as being a Black neighborhood by increasing the kinds of Black language I use to talk about it. For people who don't use very many of those features to begin with, it's really subtle. Like you're talking 2% to 6%. And for people who use a lot versus like you're talking like 12% to like 20%.
Yeah, okay.
But you see that same increase. And so that becomes one aspect. And then another aspect you see is less overt discussion of what's happening in the neighborhood and more sort of inferential discussion. And so you'll see people going, well, you know, when I was a child, this is what it was like. People were looking out for me. You felt very safe. You felt very protected. One of my participants, Tana, talks about the neighborhood pool as being idyllic. And she goes, it was almost idyllic. It was almost idyllic the way that it was for us to go to the pool. So those sorts of contrasts are the ways that people have an opportunity to talk about the neighborhood and to not back away from the struggles that the neighborhood has had, to not hide the fact that, like, yeah, there's deep poverty here, there are drug problems here, but to say, this is a wonderful place that we have moved to, that we have lived in. This is a place we want to be as middle and upper class Black residents of DC. And so the moves that are made are much more subtle. And that's one of the big things that, as I think about what I would like the book to do, for people to recognize those more subtle moves.
I was just wondering if you had any observations on what your language was like when you were doing the work for this. How did your language change? How did you use language to position yourself? What did you notice yourself doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that's really interesting about my work is like, I won't lie, I consider myself a very white positioned researcher because of my upbringing. And so I'm transracially adopted. I have 2 white parents. They were both raised in the same very small county in Northwest Ohio. And then I grew up in the city in the Southwest. I grew up in Cincinnati. And so I should have seen the linguistics thing happening far earlier. I went to the magnet school for foreign language. And
right.
So,
Gee, you were a linguist all the way through.
I was a linguist all the way through. My parents put me in the magnet school for Mandarin Chinese when I was 5. And so here I am, this little black girl with white parents learning Mandarin. That was my upbringing.
Wow.
But yeah, so in some ways, like, I feel very similar to my classmates, my graduate school classmates, who are raised differently, but sound the same. As I do. At the same time, to my interviewees, I'm very much read as, oh, this is a black woman who's come to interview us. And so, and I even have some work exploring that where, where I had an interviewee who just completely changed the way that he was talking when my classmate left. And my classmate was also from Cincinnati. She also grew up in a very similar family. We actually went to 2 high schools that were run by 2 different branches of the same convent of nuns.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
And so, like, you could not find 2 people with more similar linguistic backgrounds than the 2 of us. But the difference is we are different colors when you look at our faces. And so she had to leave halfway through the interview of this sort of elderly black gentleman in DC, and he completely changed the way that he sounded when she left.
Oh, delicious.
Delicious. It's so good. And I'm just like, wow, the only thing that changed was the skin color of the person he was talking to. This is amazing.
That's fantastic. In our last chat, you mentioned that going forward, you hoped that the neighborhood would retain its features, its Black American features. Has it? Or has it really, really changed?
I think that it has. And so I'm really anxious to see what will happen moving forward in the 2020s with this recent, I mean, it is literally weeks old. It happened about 2 months ago, this annexation of what's called Navy Yard.
Wow.
And so it is this neighborhood. And so my colleague, Nicole Holliday, who's a linguist at Penn, very well known in the social spheres. She's at Mixed Linguist on Twitter.
She's on Spectacular Vernacular.
Yep, she's the host of Spectacular Vernacular. And so she's wonderful and a delight. And so she retweeted something that I said in a talk in DC. And she said, yeah, she's like, Ward 8 used to have far fewer IPAs. So I'm a big beer drinker. And I was like, yeah, so it's going to be really interesting to see what happens as some of the monetary flows happen that are associated with these, with the other side of the river now that is monetarily part of the east side of the river.
Yeah, it's not slowing down. It's speeding up. Right.
Exactly. When I first moved to DC, they had just opened the ballpark, and you could get off the subway, the metro, as it's known in DC. So you could get off the metro, and you would pop up out of the metro, and there was a baseball stadium, and that was it.
And then they made the 11th Street Bridge.
And then there was the 11th Street Bridge, and now there's the Frederick Douglass Bridge, which is finished. Absolutely beautiful poesy of my book. The 11th Street Bridge was under construction when I started this book project.
Yep.
And I had this very convoluted way of getting to my research site. And they sort of finished the 11th Street Bridge as I was finishing the dissertation work and finishing some of my graduate work. And then the Frederick Douglass Bridge, which is on the other side of the community, they placed the last piece of the bridge the day that I turned the manuscript into the publisher.
Wow.
And so, and it's this beautiful sort of metaphor for, okay, what does it mean to have 2 brand new bridges connecting the east of the river to the rest of DC? It means that people who are east of the river are going to be able to come into the rest of DC. It means that they're going to be able to pop across the Frederick Douglass Bridge and go get that IPA and go to that fancy brunching place and go to spend their money and still have it be within Ward 8 and still have it financially benefit their part of the neighborhood.
That's true.
But it also means that other people are going to be able to come in. And who are those people going to be? What are those people going to bring? How much are they going to be invested in the neighborhood? Right now, it continues to be people who seem to be pretty deliberate, who seem to care about the same sorts of things. But that might not always be the case, and it probably won't always be the case.
But do you think that despite all that, they're hanging on to features of their original language?
Absolutely. And I think, so a lot of people, the very last chapter of the book, I talk a little bit about the fact that whenever you have something that's linguistically unusual in a series of interviews, you back up and you go, whoa, why is this happening? And the unusual thing that happened was the word bastion.
Oh, that's an interesting word, isn't it? It's like we always, oh my gosh, I'm using it. I'm doing a thing later on Australian radio about oxbows, these funny words that only occur in limited contexts, like akimbo. Only a few things can be akimbo. Well, there can only be one kind of bastion. Last bastion. You can't have a first bastion.
You can't have a first bastion. Yeah, you can only have a last bastion.
Yeah, I think I'll go for the second or third bastion. Maybe not the first one, because you never know with bastions.
It's that fourth bastion, that's the one that'll get you.
Yeah, but then you're pretty close to the last bastion, so there you go.
Yeah.
What did they say about bastion?
Yeah, so I had several people who talked about this neighborhood as being the last bastion of DC Black culture.
Oh, a siege metaphor. Oh my gosh.
Yep. And so it is this idea, which of course is kind of, it's doubly interesting because east of the river was in fact, so there's Fort Stanton Hill, which is where you can actually go and see that beautiful vista of downtown DC. But Fort Stanton was a fort in the Civil War.
Oh,
and
okay.
So there really is a bastion in Southeast DC. But, this real sense among several people who do not know each other, who do not have any reason to otherwise be all using this term, but that DC has historically been a Black city. In 1970, it was 70% Black. And that's when it became known as Chocolate City. It was this place where you could go. You could go to Howard University. If you didn't go to Howard University, you could work for the government who couldn't discriminate against you because of the color of your skin. You could guarantee that you would be able to earn a living and pass money on to your children, and then your children could earn a living and pass it on to their grandchildren. And it was a way to get a foothold in the sort of pre-civil rights era as a way against the Jim Crow South. It's where the Lovings moved when they were fighting against interracial marriage. And so it's been this place of Black success. And so there's a sense that might be slipping as the Black community starts to slip from DC. And so people have the sense, and I have the sense, that Southeast DC, and particularly the east of the river neighborhoods, need that protection as the place where DC culture is going to be instantiated, where DC culture is going to be protected. And I realize I'm using DC culture as a stand-in for DC Black culture, because that's really what it is. DC culture is a Black culture. It is go-go music. It is mumbo sauce. All of these things that come out of the history of Black people in Washington. And Southeast is going to be the last place where those things are going to be protected. And that's vital to protecting the nature of the city more broadly and protecting the nature of Black culture more broadly.
Just to wrap it up, tell me something that white folks like me need to know about race and language. What are we getting wrong, and what do we need to know?
I think the biggest thing that people are getting wrong, and it's not just white people, it is lots of people in thinking about the nature of the interconnectedness of race and language, is that we think of language as being something that is somehow tied to race, that, okay, if you have a particular racial identity, you're going to use language in a particular way. If you don't have that identity, you're going to use it in a different way. If your area you're coming from has a particular racial identity, you'll use it in a particular way. And instead, we really need to be thinking about race as a thing that is done through language. And the ways that we create our racial identities, that we express whiteness, blackness, Latinidad through language, and that these things are agentive. These things are responsive to the broader social situation we're in. So you're going to sound different if you're a Black person in a gentrifying community than you're going to sound if you're a Black person in a neighborhood that has stayed exactly the same. You're going to sound different if you're a Black person who is in a neighborhood that is surrounded by white people than you are as a Black person in a neighborhood that has always had a really rich, stable Black culture. And so for people to think about these intersections of race and other kinds of identities in ways that are productive, that are fruitful, and that those intersections then tell us a lot about the kinds of things that race, or not the kinds of things that race is doing, but the kinds of things that language is doing with respect to race is extremely important.
It seems like white people don't feel like they're performing whiteness, just like if you sound like most other people in a place, you say, I don't have an accent, but everyone's got an accent, everyone's got a race. Race isn't just something that those other people have.
Right. Exactly. When we think about, and linguists have fallen into this trap, as we think about different sound features and things, we go, oh, okay, this is regional. It's like, well, no, that's not just regional. It's white. Like the reason it varies is that it varies among white people, and non-white people do things differently. And so, that's another flip side of this, is that white language is also agentive. And so it's just that white people are doing different things with the kinds of language that they're doing. And so maybe they're doing more class things, or maybe they're doing more regional things. But those things are also situated within racial identity as well.
The book is The Black Side of the River. It's available now from Georgetown University Press. Dr. Jessi Grieser, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. It's just been really, really fun to talk about your book.
Yeah, this has been a delight. It's really wonderful to talk to you again.
Let's get to the words of the week, and the first one was suggested by Nikolai on our Discord server. This one is extremely not safe for work, but it's fascinating as well. It's not a suffix, but I think it is a combining form. It's ussi, or is it ussi? Ussi or ussi? I'm not sure.
Okay, so are we thinking of the word hussy or the word pussy?
We're thinking pussy, but with a B.
Is it from a sign for a cafe that they misspelled?
What? No.
There's a thing going on Instagram. There's like, I think it's like in Iran or something. There's a cafe called something. It's supposed to be something pussy because it's a cat.
Okay.
But they've spelled it bussy. And in this case, it's because P is not really a sound in Arabic.
Oh.
But B is.
Why didn't I think of that?
And it's really funny, and people get T-shirts with the sign on them.
So why, let's go back a step. Why is pussy with a B, bussy? Why is that what is that in relation to? Why is that word in my eyeballs and ear holes right now?
That word caught fire because it was part of the queer community slang, and it's a portmanteau. It's boy pussy, which means a male anus or a transmasculine anus, which is a phrase that I've never said before.
Okay.
Okay, you're right. That is quite not safe for work.
So we start there.
Okay.
And then we go on to ussi, or ussi. I see I'm stuck on ussi. I don't feel like saying ussi, but I'm going to try.
Yeah.
It's become productive, and it's attaching itself onto, well, just about anything. So, for example...
Give us the portmanteau front ends, right? So we know that bussy is a combination of boy and pussy. Give us the interchanges with boy.
Well, for example, people have cited thrussy, throat.
Oh, wow.
Or if, in another sexual use, Nussy.
Hang on.
Nose?
Improbable, but yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I find that hard to believe, sir.
Nasal sex is not something that I would recommend, but now it's sort
It's
of
really
kind of
popular
expanding.
on Twitch. Have you noticed?
Is
Nasal
it?
sex?
What, productive ussy?
No, nasal
Or
sex.
nasal sex.
Nasal sex. How is nasal sex popular on Twitch?
Well, I was on Twitch the other day and I saw the ASMR section, and I was like, I'll just check what's there. And everything
seen
that
the
was
ear
popular.
licking.
Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. That's ear sex, right?
Okay, but that's not that's yeah, but he said nose.
Oh, sorry, nose. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. I was
Those are different holes.
Different orifice.
close to each other. I was thinking about that. Anyway, I was very surprised. It's so popular. Now, nose seems weird. Yeah.
Since then, it's just expanded, mostly as a joke, I think, but people are referring to an ussy as any sort of canal or place that
Any
things
fuckable
go
crevice. Is this what we're going to?
It's becoming disconnected from sex. For example, let me just play some audio from this TikTok video. It's from Floorboy, link on our website.
What is the name for the Connect Ussy, where you enter the plane doors from the boarding gate?
My fear for the future of our language is that the suffix ussy is just going to be accepted and part of regular speech. I mean, this room is great, but it only has 3 chargersies in the walls. How am I supposed to plug in my lamps? This radio has a cassette tussie. I didn't know we used cassette tussies anymore. Now, this is a MIDI keyboard, but it actually uses a USB port.
Obviously, this is in fun, but it is fun, and fun is one way that we get new language things.
I think it's really fun. So he's just using ussy for anything that's like an opening.
Any orifice, metaphorical or otherwise.
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go. That is...
It's funny.
Thanks, Floorboy.
I do love people my age roasting younger people on TikTok. It's something that comes up in my feed a lot.
Is that because you're a
So-
teacher?
But it's meant in good fun. Like, I will say this about that gentleman. I think he was teasing in a light-hearted and genuinely nice kind of way.
Like I say, only half joking. People are using productive ussy, and it's too bad for the actual word ussy, which once referred to a selfie with more than one person in it, but then nobody cared about that word because they just called everything a selfie. So, productive ussy or ussy, watch for it at an orifice near you. Next one. Hedvig, do you want to do one of yours?
Yeah. So I felt very inspired because for some reason I found more new words and phrases this week than I usually do. So one of the ones
So
is not, and it's not is obviously not a new word. So it's not as in the negation. I'm not lying.
N-O-T.
N-O-T. So I've noticed a pattern on Twitter and other places where people say, for example, so I pulled up some examples. Not my aunt blasting Mr. Worldwide on TV. Or not my aunt telling me to buy condoms. Not my boyfriend getting me a cameo for Miriam Margoyles for my birthday. Not my best friend getting into NFTs.
And what is the person doing in this?
Yeah, so I've noticed this pattern. So so not my best friend getting into NFTs. Their best friend is getting into NFTs.
Right.
And they're reacting similarly to if someone said, like, I'm getting into NFTs, and you say, no, you're not.
Oh,
Like,
not
it's-
NFTs.
It's that one, right?
So the person, so it has to be a thing that's happening. It has to be someone else, and you, the person talking about it, kind of have to be a bit disapproving of what's happening.
You might
Oh, no, not
be able
you.
to do it about yourself. You might be like, not me spilling milk all over my new
Right.
dress.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I getcha.
I think you can do
but
that.
it has to be a bad thing.
It's a little bit sarcastic, isn't it? Well, this is
yeah.
not me doing the thing.
I think it's sarcastic. It's negative, but maybe like not my aunt telling me to buy condoms. They're embarrassed and shocked that their aunt told them that, maybe.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's not they don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that
There's a negative quality to them in some way, though, right?
Negative valence.
Or, if not a negative valence, an embarrassing valence.
yes. Some of these things I think would fall under cringe in a way, right? Not my
okay.
best friend getting into NFTs because NFTs are a bit cringy, right?
If the 14-year-old boys that I teach are any metric, they are definitely cringy.
Also, if you want to know more about how NFTs could actually, like, maybe sometimes be a good idea, but they're probably overall not, the QAA crowd, the QAnon Anonymous did an episode all about it. Because, like, people should be getting money for their art. Like there's something.
Sure.
There's like there's like something that is bordering on good, right?
So I can't recommend enough the Folding Ideas video on NFTs. Like that was definitely, it's like one of those videos of like, are you a smart person who has looked away from this issue for far too long and now don't know anything about it, but you really want to know lots about it?
Yeah.
Here's a 2-hour explainer video on the birth, rise, plateau, and eventual death and demise of NFTs. And it was so good. So the video is called Line Goes Up, and it's by a great YouTube channel called Folding Ideas. So go check it out.
Wow.
If you, like me, consider yourself to be a not stupid person who just has desperately not looked into NFTs because it's just so wacky and annoying, this is the video for you.
Yeah.
If you've got 2 hours of free time
That
to just like
that
go down
sounds
the
great.
rabbit hole. It's the deepest of deep dives.
All right, Heavy, give me another one.
Okay, next word of the week from me is, and this is, Ben's probably going to know this, and Daniel probably isn't, uncut gems.
Uncut gems. No idea.
Ben, do you want to explain or should I?
Okay. I don't know the backstory of this particular video. I've just seen it blow up on TikTok. So I can't name you the actress or any of the relevant people. But basically, if you're not familiar with TikTok, something that can happen on TikTok is the sound from one TikTok can be used for lots and lots of other TikToks.
Stitching, right?
No.
Duetting.
Also no.
Oh.
God, you boomer. Jesus, shut the fuck up and
I'm
get back
3
in
years
your
away
box.
from boomer. I resent that statement.
Look, it's just a thing, right? Like any video can just dub, essentially, the sound from another video or any number of things, songs, bunch of other stuff.
Okay.
There is a interview that was loaded onto TikTok of a woman just sort of saying a very regrettable thing about herself, basically going like, yeah, I was someone's muse. I was so-and-so's muse on Uncut Gems. And the way she pronounces gems is, I believe, Hedvig, with just like a fucking black hole's worth of vocal fry.
Yeah. It's amazing. I put a link in our word. I'll put it in Discord as well because I think we should definitely play it. I definitely think we are allowed to play it. And Sylvia Sierra, for example, was one of the people who tweeted this out. So the person in question is Julia Fox, and she's talking. Apparently, Uncut Gems is a movie, and like Ben was saying, she was talking about being a muse, which like maybe is cringy or whatever. But I think what most people caught on to is the way she says Uncut Gems. So if you want to hear it, Daniel, you could click it and the video.
And here it is, listeners. Listen to how she says it now.
Here I go.
What is a muse?
I mean, I was Josh Safdie's muse when he wrote Uncut Gems.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like
Uncut Gems.
Uncut Gems.
Can I jump in at this point, right? The thing that, like, I fully think that this person was being a bit conceited, for lack of a better phrase, right? But what...
She was flexing.
No!
What I...
No, she was speaking perfectly
what
good
I don't...
vocal fry California Valley Girl English.
Oh, no. I want to be abundantly clear. I'm not talking about how she's pronounced anything here, right? My thing is that she's flexing about being someone's muse. That's a conceited thing to say.
Yeah, maybe.
So that I think is a fair criticism to offer.
I was Muse's muse. I was for the band Muse. Yeah. I was their muse.
What I don't love and what I started seeing a lot of is just people making fun of how girls speak. Because that's all that I'm seeing here is just a whole bunch of people being, look at this fucking dickhead who speaks like a dumb bitch. Like that's literally like when you I don't think I'm being unfair when I say that is actually the cultural subtext to nearly every response to this that you see on TikTok, which is, and it's a lot of it is women, like it's not just like misogynistic men, but there is just a real vibe of like, aren't these dumb bitches such dumb bitches? And I don't have a lot of time for that personally.
No, neither do I. And I think it's like it's a couple of things. So she's elongated the vowel a bit. She has a lot of vocal fry, and she's going up a bit because she's talking to actually another woman as well, and she's saying like do you agree with me, like or getting feedback. So she goes Uncut Gems, you know, she goes up to get the other person to, and it's a perfectly normal, fine thing to say. I like it because I actually I like vocal fry, and I think this is a fun example. So when I started seeing it, I actually didn't pick up on the criticism, like people dunking on her first, because I was just like, oh, that's just a fun Valley Girl vocal fry snippet. I like this. And I think there are some other people like me who just thinks it's like fun and not bad, but it's hard to tell.
Can we talk for a second about the vowel? That's, instead of gems, which is a mid
It
vowel,
does sound almost like jams, doesn't
jams.
Yeah, a lot of people are transcribing it with an A.
That's fantastic. So is that similar? Is this happening with the northern U.S. cities vowel shift? Because there are a number of vowel shifts in progress. The northern cities vowel shift is huge. And for example, the name Bob would be Bab. Well, Bab, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Oh, so we're talking, sorry, when you say northern cities, you're like Minnesota and Milwaukee and Wisconsin and that sort of thing.
Except that it's now happening everywhere.
Yeah. So I wonder if this is partaking in that. I don't have enough experience to be able to say yes or no, but
Too far removed from the West Coast, my friend.
Since I had my half day, I had my Australian half-life this month. It happened this month.
Holy shit, really?
Yep, I've lived in Australia now a few days longer than I've lived in the USA ever.
That's it.
Wow.
Gotta give your Seppo card in, my friend.
That's fine with me.
We gotta file off that dialect though. Like you gotta.
Well, I'm afraid we're a
Just gotta
little
round
bit
off those
late.
hard edges.
Brain plasticity being what it is. I got some of the vowels.
Yeah.
I've lost my caught distinction.
There you go.
Oh, that's right.
Look how proud he is. He's like a cat that's brought like a bird home.
That's right, Ben.
Yeah, very good.
And you don't say Melbourne, so that's good.
I really like that clip. That's a great clip. I'm really enjoying that. Thank you for bringing that.
And I think we should all aspire to use more vocal fry. I love vocal fry. I'm gonna
Vocal fry's
try
awesome.
and have more vocal fry in my the rest of this episode.
You know what? I'm going to leave that for the people for whom it works for, because for me, it like totally doesn't. It just makes me sound like I've had like a laryngectomy or something.
And let's all try to cultivate the mindset of when we hear somebody doing something different, thinking, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what's going on there. Instead of, this person sucks and I rule. Especially in language.
And let's maybe also, when we think something is fun and interesting, if we're meeting someone in person, even if it's on Zoom, remember that being like, you're really interesting, I want to study you, can also be creepy.
Yeah.
This is not a thing normal people have to worry about, Hedvig. I think this is a you problem.
No, but linguists do this.
Because linguists, you first have to get them out of the prescriptivism, like, you're saying something bad. And then they get into that, you're saying something interesting. And then you have to be like,
Right.
not everyone wants to hear how interesting they are.
Not in the granular degree of your PhD thesis application.
Yeah. So just, but we can nerd about it to ourselves, and that's acceptable.
And that is what we do.
Yeah.
Cool.
But uncut jams.
That's great.
I love it.
Uncut jams.
Uncut jams. So fun to say.
We got a couple of comments. One from Bill via email, hello@becauselanguage.com. He says, this is not a question, but I had to share what I think is an eggcorn for... Eggcorn, by the way?
Yeah,
What's
he's
an
written
eggcorn?
eggcorn. He means acorn, maybe.
No, hang on. Eggcorn is a thing.
Yes,
right?
it is
We've
a
talked
thing.
about them. Yeah.
We've talked about them a lot. So eggcorns are little slip-ups that make sense.
So nipping it in the butt
Yeah,
is a classic example instead of nipping it in the bud.
that's right. Or I give my husband free range to do what he wants instead of
Yes,
free reign.
yeah.
Right? And the reason they're called acorns is because an internet writer wrote about acorns, but wrote egg corns instead. Then you know what? Darned if it doesn't make a little bit of sense because they're related to trees. So corn and they're a seed, like an egg grows into a chicken, an acorn grows into a... So it's an acorn.
Yep.
So that's the name for these things. So an acorn here's what it's for. Tinker's Dam.
Okay.
Bill says, and it's the most interesting eggcorn I've seen in a while. So here was the quote from the article that he linked me to. It's about the movie Purple Rain. But it was as an adult that I realized no one involved in the making of this film gave even a tincture of a damn about women.
Oh, there we go.
You know,
I
a
like
tincture is a very small amount of something like a medicine in a lot of liquids. So that's an interesting little eggcorn there.
Thank you,
is that what
Bill.
is that what tincture is? I thought it was a blend of things. I thought it was a tonic.
Let's just look that up very quickly.
No, I could very well be wrong.
Happy to be corrected on
It's the
that
type
one.
of word that you can probably get away with for your almost entire adult life misunderstanding and like.
Well, to be fair, unless you are constantly going to like Ren fairs or something, I'm not sure that like tinctures and poultices and like unless you've legitimately gone into a person's shop who is pretending to be an apothecary, I don't think this is a thing that necessarily comes up in day-to-day life.
By the way, what is a tinker's dam? Why is it tinker?
Well, tinkers were traveling persons who, like, of no fixed address, who throughout all of the medieval ages would, like, come to towns and fix things and just perform various services and that sort of thing.
Okay.
So I'm guessing even back then they were treated and thought of very poorly. So what they cared about was, like, at the very bottom of the hierarchy of people giving a fuck about things. And so what tinkers care about is like the lowest thing to care about. So I couldn't even give what they care about things to this thing, let alone what I, a normal relevant person, would. Again, I don't think that's a fair thing. I'm just thinking that's maybe where it came from.
That's better than the best explanation that I got, and I am accepting it wholeheartedly.
Okay, cool. What was your one?
Yes, Hedvig.
I was just going to say I looked up tincture.
And?
Was I right?
It is typically an extract of a plant dissolved in ethanol.
Oh,
Cool.
there we go. So a small amount of something in a thing.
Yep.
Small is not in the definition.
Okay. I might have gotten the small bit wrong.
Yeah.
So there are lots of fake stories about why it's a tinker's dam. There's a story that's it's a damree, which is a coin, but that's probably fake. Some people say it's a wall of dough raised around a place that a plumber wants to flood with a coat of solder. It's worthless after you do it, and so you throw it away, and so it's not even worth a tinker's dam. But those are probably wrong because people have been saying something is not worth a damn way before they started saying it's not worth a tinker's dam. And the explanation that I have heard is that tinkers tend to swear a lot, and so it's if talk is cheap, then their swearing is cheap.
Right, like a sailor's dam kind of thing. Like it's
yeah. Like they just say it all the time. It's worth nothing. So not even a tinker's dam. But I'm really enjoying your definition as well. Last comment, and this one is from our newest patron, Ayelet from Israel, who says, I just listened to episode 46 and wanted to share about word of the week, no because.
Yes.
Remember no because?
Yes.
Similar to the not thing.
It is very similar to the not thing. No, because check this out, which means drop everything and check this out. Ayelet says, in Israeli Hebrew, we've been using no because another way. When someone complains about something and you tell him he's not so great either, or his argument is inconsistent, comes with a sarcastic tone. For instance, George says, I wouldn't date her. Her hair looks silly. And Elaine says, no, because your hair is perfect.
Right, yep, that makes sense. I can see that for sure.
Or, this cake ruined my diet. And person B says, no, because before you were following your diet perfectly.
Yeah, okay. I like it.
Ayelet continues, it's so common that people now just say, no, because you, as an answer in an argument without finishing the sentence. How about that? No,
Don't
because
even
you.
have to provide evidence anymore. It's just like, no, you're the problem.
Because you. I like that a lot, so thanks, Ayelet. That's so awesome, and I love your comments. Ben and Hedvig, thank you both for being here. Thanks also to Dr. Jessi Grieser of the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, author of The Black Side of the River, now available from Georgetown University Press.
If you wanted to give us a comment or get in touch with us in any way, there's so many different ways you can do it. You can follow us in all of the places. We are Because Lang Pod in basically everywhere. Daniel is very, shall we say, fastidious in his adherence to different platforms. We've even started making TikToks, just quick show excerpts. So if you want to find us on that TikTok app, that's a thing you can do now. You can also, and this is something that I really want to push, you can record something for us to play on the show using SpeakPipe. It's now a link on our website, so go check it out if you want to drop us a little thing. Any of the comments that you want to make for us, and we've got people who make all sorts of wonderful comments, show ideas, story ideas, words of the week, you could do it as a voice memo, and then we could play your voice here in the show, and you wouldn't have to listen to as much of my dumb voice, and I think everyone would agree that's a great outcome.
John, jump back on. Your audio was terrible, and I need to hear you say it again, okay? Thanks, John.
Okay. Oh, yes, John. Thank you, John. And of course, if you are just that old-fashioned, you can always send us an email at hello@becauselanguage.com. If you want to help the show, you can. You can send us show ideas like articles, stories, and words of the week. We mostly hang out on Discord. Come and say g'day. And you can also recommend us to friends and strangers like Dustin of Sandman Stories still does every single time someone asks him for a podcast recommendation on Twitter, something that Hedvig and I and Daniel are still amazed that he opens himself up for.
Did you know that Sandman Stories is actually a really good podcast? You should listen. Now, because of our great patrons who give us amounts of money every month, we are able to do stuff like run this show for everyone without putting ads in the middle of it. We're also able to make transcripts so our shows are readable for people who like to read or who can't listen. And they're searchable so you can find out the stuff that we say. So can I just also say that the team at Speech Docs is doing an amazing job on our transcripts. They are so on the ball, and they get it right. They're fast and accurate. I'm pretty sure that they go through our show notes when they hit a weird word that they don't know, because it's in there, and I'm surprised.
I am just so sorry, Speech Docs. I know how fucking awful I am to transcribe. I'm so sorry.
You're just making their work harder, Ben.
I know. I'm just... You're listening right now. I'm sorry.
Is Ben bad?
Ben's wonderful. I can listen to Ben's voice.
Yeah, I love Ben's voice. I can hear everything he says.
It's not a quality thing, apparently. I just remember when...
It's the bones in your head. That's what it is.
When we spoke to our last transcriber, I could tell there was a facial expression. It was like there are many versions of language, right? Not just verbal spoken communication, and some of those pathways were saying some pretty clear things to me.
Wow.
Okay. I'd just like to give a shout out to our top patrons, Dustin Termy, Chris B, James S, who boosted his pledge, thanks for that, Matt Whitney, Chris L, Helen Udo, Jack Farrowcat, Lord Mortis, Elias, Larry, Christopher, Andy, James, Nigel, Meredith, Kate, Nasrin, Aisha, Sneaky Lemur, Moe, Steele, Andrew, Manu, Roger, Rianne, Colleen, Glyph, Ignacio, Sonic, Snedgehog. If you give yourself a cool name, then I'll take extra time and I'll linger over it. Kevin, Jeff, Andy from Logophilius, Samantha, Zoe, Kathy, Rachel, Cheyenne, Felicity, Amir, Andy, Tim, and the wonderful KB, who didn't contribute via Patreon, but instead smashed the one-time donation button on our website, becauselanguage.com. Also thanks to our newest patrons, David and Ali at the friend level, and smashing through at the listener level, our newest patrons, Clark, Ayelet, Ellen, Shay, Piri, Anna Marie, and Lena. And thanks also to our good friend Israel for boosting to the listener level. Thanks to all of our amazing patrons.
Yes, thank you to all of our amazing patrons indeed. Our theme music has been written and performed by Drew Kopianov, who's a member of Ryan Bino and of Didion's Bible. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. Because language.
You sound like me when you say that.
It's because usually you say that.
You don't sound like me, which is probably good for the transcribers.
Can we just talk for a moment about how millennials and Zoomers have migrated to like either loving 7-second clips of content or 2-hour video essays? Right?
Why not both?